I have never read a book that conveyed more vividly what the terror of being a slave was. We all know the basic facts. It's not true that slavery is kept hidden, that America hasn't acknowledged it. It's acknowledged it a great deal. Scholars, including very dedicated white ones writing very detailed books about slavery, it's no longer America's secret. But, you almost get inured to it. You think, well, there were people who were working without pay, there was whipping, families were separated, but to really feel the terror, some of the scenes in James.
As I read it, I understood him to be lecturing the character James to the young blacks that you had to be careful. White people are dangerous and they're also insecure. And if they think that you are challenging them in any way, that they are not the ones who are setting the agenda, who are at the control panel in charge of what's going on, the repercussions will be detrimental to you and could be deadly. So this is a matter of life and death as to how you conduct yourself under conditions of domination.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be uppity.
Right.
Don't get ahead of these people, even though you are thinking circles around them, because in fact, these white masters are infantile and predictable and manipulatable, if that's a word, can be manipulated. And language is a critical tool in that endeavor.
Very much.
That's all right to you?
Yeah, that's exactly what they're conveying. And I have never read a book that conveyed more vividly what the terror of being a slave was. I think, we all know the basic facts. It's not true that slavery is kept hidden, that America hasn't acknowledged it. It's acknowledged it a great deal, especially since the 1970s. You've got scholars, including very dedicated white ones, writing very detailed books about slavery. It's no longer America's secret. But you almost get inured to it. You think, well, there were people who were working without pay, there was whipping, but families were separated. But to really feel the terror, some of the scenes in James, at one point, James and his, who's he with at the time? James is with a friend, and the friend looks white, but is very partly black, and therefore is a slave himself. But this other person is posing as white. And they're just walking down the street in a town, and this quote unquote ancient white woman says, "Did he look at me?" And the other guy says, Oh no, better not have. Did he just say something to me? Better not have. That sort of thing. That's their whole life. And what she means by better not have is, if that slave was looking at me or addressing me directly, I'm going to get people to beat the hell out of him and maybe kill him. That's what they live under. That's what it would have been like. I don't read enough fiction, and so maybe there's some things I missed, but I hadn't felt it that deeply since my mother made me read Roots back in the 70s. And I don't think Roots, even with some of the maiming in Roots, I don't think it conveyed it as precisely as James. It's a book of terror, really, and the language is part of that. Don't speak standard English. Don't talk like them or you might get killed. I thought that was very well done, even though that's not what it was like linguistically, but still, yeah.
Would you place Percival Everett in the first ranks of African-American writers in the 21st century?
I'm going to honestly say that I don't read enough fiction to have any authority on that. I read 10 novels a year, if that. I like nonfiction better.
10 is a lot, man. 10 novels a year.
I'm a readaholic, but it's not the first thing I grab. Like, I'm looking up at my shelf. Some of it is actually under this laptop. Let's see. I've got one novel. I've never read The Bluest Eye. I've decided it's time to
Toni Morrison.
The Bluest Eye. I've got The Oldest Living Confederate Widow Tells All by Gurganis, because people talk about it. And if I look up, there is a Trollope novel, because I've been kind of getting into him. That's it. Then there's Evelina by Frances Burney, because somebody told me that Frances Burney was as good as Jane Austen and nobody talks about it. All the rest, like 10 other books, are nonfiction. That's how I read. And this is actually heavy on novels at this point. So anyway, the point being, I don't think I know. I think many people would say Jessamine Ward, but I haven't read one of her books yet. What do you think?
Well, I read novels from time to time. I have a little book club with my sons, Glenn II and Nehemiah. And, every month or two, there will be a book that we'll read together and then discuss. We may have video conferences. Nehemiah lives in San Francisco. Glenn lives outside of Boston. And the last one was called Babel by a Chinese American writer whose name escapes me at the moment. But the book is vivid in my mind. It's set in England in the Victorian era, the 1830s, 1840s, late 30s, early 40s, during the Opium War period when the Brits or colonialists are trying to impose the opium trade on the Chinese, and they're encountering resistance. And it's at a language institute at Oxford where translators are being trained. And there's a cadre of young non-Brits, they're from South Asia, they're from China, they're from Africa, Caribbean, and they're brilliant young people who are being trained in in the art of translation so that they can be aids to the business interest and militarist on the British imperial side as they negotiate with the locals. They come out and they go to the meetings and they whisper in the ear of the British masters and render the British response to the locals in the local dialect, and they're being trained to do this. Anyway, long story short, they form a underground rebellion against the empire. In the novel, they resist. They become kind of revolutionaries. They have a secret society. It's very intricate, very well done. The characters are beautifully rendered, and the themes are, well, they could be to a certain degree relevant to contemporary times. Anyway, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Fiction is, I once knew a very wise person who said, the thing about the classics is they're good. And she was right. There's a reason why most of the classics are good, and there are a lot of really good modern novels out there. And I wish I read more. It's interesting when people talk about writing, a writing workshop, the art of writing. It's just like if you say, does somebody drink, you mean alcohol. Writing is supposed to be fiction. The idea that nonfiction books are writing too is thought of as kind of ancillary. It's people cherish fiction, and most readers cherish fiction more than I really do. And it's a shame, because I shouldn't say cherish, I should say seek. Because once I'm in the book, I generally am really enjoying it. But then the next thing, I want to read about biology or something like that.